individuals in live shop, the pop-up talks. Now, last year, I gave an anti-war speech, and I was thinking, I'd like to do something a little bit different this year, but recent developments and news out of Afghanistan almost necessitates that I tackle the issue of war again. Last year, I went ahead and emphasized my own personal history of service, my family's history of service. Looking at my dad in World War II, my great-grandfather in the Civil War in the Union Army. It seems like it's necessary for some of us when we talk about anti-war. We present the anti-war position of the Libertarian platform. There's always some chucklehead who says, "Well, did you serve?" And I can say, "Yes, it's on." Exactly. Yeah, what Tricia said. What's that? I'm so good at it. Just ask my wife. She didn't verify that. Last year I was talking about just how military service just seems to interweave in the most unusual ways with presidential year politics, the election year politics. I'm going to have the transcript of that speech on my website, document.org, if you want to check that out at some point. Contrast the two messages. This time I want to, instead of talking endlessly about my own service, talk about my dad. I want to delve deeper into Ben Kissick. He was in many ways the stereotypical greatest generation, this old guy hardness. Born in 1923, drafted into the Army in 1942, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And I remember growing up, he loved to make the comment, you know what, going into the Army would straighten him out. A stint in the Army would do you some good. Especially, I'm the youngest of 4 boys, 3 older brothers. So I heard this with some regularities directed at them. And then I'm in my high school years. And high school is winding down. It is now winter going to spring of 1988, my last semester of public schooling. And now the recruiters are starting to come. First is the Army, which is where Dad served. And I was flirting with the idea. I talked to the recruiter quite a bit. Kind of let that get away from me. Then the Marines started coming. And this guy was a salesman. He really made entry into the Marine Corps very sexy, very intriguing. Well, at this point, my dad, Mr. Good hits the Army would, do you a lot of good. This man practically dragged me by the collar, drove me to the Air Force recruiter's office. I just hummed and hawed. Now, later that year, I ended up enlisting in the Navy. It seemed like a pretty reasonable middle ground between the two positions. But it wouldn't be for years later when I would really understand and appreciate the significance of that moment that I had. And we didn't have, shall we say, the most functional, parent-child relationship. Dad didn't have a this. So I had to learn to kind of pick out the moments. It's like, this is pretty significant. Sir can tell you, a lot of what I've had to learn from him is what not to do as a father. But he had his moments, not always bad. And in this regard, this is a man who never actually would say, "I love you." I don't think I've ever heard those words passed in his lips. So I had to figure out what were the ways he showed me that. And trying to steer me toward the Air Force as opposed to the other branches was that way. I don't know what the nature of my great-grandfather's service was, but I've heard stories from other family members about what my dad endured. He only saw combat once. It was in the front lines of France, Battle of the Bulge. He narrowly avoided being killed with the shelling that was going on near his unit at the time. One shell literally shook him out of his foxhole. The next one knocked him out and sent him into a PTSD extended paralysis that he would have to slowly work his way out of. He did that in a military hospital in Liverpool, England. Once he was deemed recovered, and once the VE day came and went, he was then assigned to a prison of war camp. And we finished out his term of service there. And when I said, it wasn't for many years later, I realized, and there's comedic irony in this too. The same man that would tell you, be more than happy to make the comment, the time in the military would really do you some good. An enlistment would really straighten you out. That, Ben Francis Kissick, though, when it came time for one of his own sons to go in the military, and one of his own sons to potentially wear the uniform in a combat situation, Ben Francis Kissick was a very different tune. And I believe it through this out until after I became more and more anti-war, as I really took time to honestly assess the nature of the military-industrial complex and the way it just controls so many aspects of how our government operates in America. And so what's the point of all this? I know like I mentioned earlier, selling the anti-war plank in our platform can be a tough sell. Some people are just red, white, and blue, why do we hate America? I don't hate America, I love America. I love my fellow service members. I love the people who have made the same commitment I did at age 18. I can't respect them enough. Entering the military is one of the most honorable choices a young person can make. And I don't like when people try to suggest, resist, don't join, don't this. There's a lot of trust in their chain of command. But at the top of that chain of command are 4 civilians who do not wear a uniform and have no skin in the game. President, Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, and then the Secretary of your respective branch of service. They're the ones who decide the missions. They're the ones who write the orders for the deployments. They're the ones failing us. And I would discourage anyone from taking out on the young people who are currently serving, or the people who just got their discharges. Don't do that. That's one way we can help win people over. The other is try to speak their language. Because my dad may not have wanted to be anti-war. He may have wanted to cling because that's his narrative and he wasn't going to lose it. That's how some people are. But you've got to be able to speak their language. And this is where the veterans really need to play a vitally important role in the messaging. We can say, I've been there. I have seen people have come back. I myself didn't face combat, but I've known a lot of guys who came back from Desert Storm with my time of service. And they're talking about, I know that I was exposed to something. When I talk about the Gulf Wars, these are the guys who need to be willing to go in front of the cameras and say, we can't do this anymore. These are the ones who should talk to, say, a crowd at the VFW, or wherever they may hold a rally, especially a very conservative community neighborhood. Get them to give this message. Explain why they're opposed to it, not because, I hate this, or the flag's just a cloth and all that. We explain, this is what I've endured. This is what I've seen my brothers and sisters who wore the uniform. This is what I've seen them endure. Is it worth it? $2 trillion, is it worth it? $200 billion training the Afghan army. Was it worth it? We've made things more unstable in the place that we said was so dangerous to the rest of the world. Was it worth it? If we can give that message out there, and if the veterans, if you can, I used to be pretty flyweight when I first got involved 12 years ago. Now I've not seen anyone here that I knew back then, so we've had some turnover, but talk to your fellow libertarians and let them know there's a right way and a wrong way to get this message out. Find the right way, know your audience, and maybe, just maybe, we can really make some progress on bringing back the military industrial complex. Thank you very much.